On this episode of the Chris Elliott Real Estate Show, we're talking about your home's two worst enemies, mold and water, with Bryan Payne of Bone Dry Waterproofing and Foundation Repair. And now to the show.
Welcome to the Chris Elliott Real Estate Show, where we bring you insights into the local Central Virginia real estate market, go in depth to answer your real estate questions and concerns, and interview local figures and influencers in the greater Richmond area. And now let's get to the latest episode with your host, Chris Elliott, and co-host, Maddie Ray.
Welcome back to the Chris Elliott Real Estate Show. Very, very excited for our show today. We have Mr. Bryan Payne of Bone Dry. Super excited to be talking about all things crawl space and waterproofing. Bryan, welcome to the show. How are you doing, my friend?
Thanks so much, Chris. Very happy to be here. I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing good.
All right.
Super excited. We were talking right before we hit the record button. This is your first podcast.
It is.
The podcast
certainly.
version. Always,
Yes.
always fun to have. So, Bryan, before we get into the nitty gritty of what you do professionally, give me a little bit about your background. How'd you get into the business that you're in today? You know, tell me the story of how you got to this point today, and then maybe a little bit of a snippet of what the business looks like today.
Okay. Let's see. In '93, a friend convinced me to enter into this area of waterproofing, and have been doing it ever since. Parents were getting a little bit older in 2004, so I moved back home from out of state, and we started Bone Dry.
Nice. Where'd you move from?
Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama. Spent 9 years there.
Gotcha. And I feel like anybody that's lived North Carolina below will tell you that Virginia is not really the South. It's like maybe on paper it's the South, but if you lived in Alabama, you're like, it's not the South.
You're from up north.
Yeah.
If you're in Alabama, you're from up north. Right. Certainly. Yes.
Very cool. And tell me, what does the business look like today? Is it just you as the owner operator? Do we have staff? What does that all look like?
We do have staff, have office manager, operations manager, and 3 crews.
Yeah. And you guys will, how many crawl spaces, how many jobs would you guys say you do in a given year?
In a given year, 300.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
So you're not new to this, is what I was getting at. Yeah.
Not at all.
Not your first rodeo at all.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Super cool. Well, tell me, for somebody that just crawled out from under a rock, when we talk about crawl space treatment, when we talk about mold remediation, when we talk about waterproofing, what does that mean if you were explaining it to a 5th grader?
Okay, if we start with waterproofing and water issues, many people call and they have water in their crawl spaces. So water's infiltrating in through the walls and they need a solution.
Yeah.
No matter who you call in waterproofing, no matter what state or city it is, all waterproofing is water management. It's drainage systems.
Yeah.
So it's either a drainage system around the perimeter of a home on the exterior or the perimeter on the interior, where you collect water and then move it out, either with a pump or using gravity to keep the area dry and solid.
Sure.
So that'd be your first order, is to manage water. Then there are more mold issues than ever now.
Yeah.
And nothing's really changed with mold. They say there are over 200,000 types. They're all in the fungi family. All mold needs to grow and thrive is humidity around 60%. It doesn't really need a source of water. A source of water will definitely elevate the humidity level.
Sure.
So nothing's changed with mold. Nothing's changed with this part of the country. It's very humid. But something big that did change is, if you go back roughly 53, 54 years ago, from that point forward, almost every home has been built with fast-growing, genetically modified pine, and it's strong enough to grow with or to build with.
Sure.
But it's very pulpy, so it's easy for the mold or fungi to root into it and grow.
Interesting. That is a fun fact I was not aware of.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And you touched on it kind of a little bit, but why is mold so common in our area? You know, a lot of times we talk to people that are maybe moving in from out of the area or out of state or from the Midwest or the West Coast, and they're just not used to that as much. Why is that so common in our area?
Well, if we look at a map of the country, we're the greenest section, the East Coast. And as you go further west, of course, you head out into the plains, then more desert-like areas. So it's just very humid here.
Yeah.
Definitely a lot more mold here than other areas because of that. Also, with the humidity and warm air, many homes have ductwork underneath for the air conditioning systems.
Sure.
And that ductwork will sweat and drip, so that will add to it as well.
Yeah. So it's a combination of the humidity that we see just being on the East Coast and then also the warmer temperatures that we get being in the Mid-Atlantic.
Yes, and the fast-growing wood.
Yeah.
Older homes, mold can still grow on that type of wood that's old-growth pine or oak.
Yeah.
It just takes a lot longer, and it's a slower process.
Interesting. I did not know that. Okay. And just to kind of quantify the problem here, so what health problems can untreated water damage or mold or these type of situations that we're talking about, why should a homeowner be concerned about this versus just saying, hey, honey, forget it, it's under the house? I mean, I know from a real estate perspective, but from a health and from the health of the home, why is that an issue?
Well, I believe it's the World Health Organization says that out of the 17 industrialized nations, we are the sickest. So many people now are sick, and as they get sick or have different issues, it's because their immune system has been compromised. So weak immune systems mean you're going to have more illnesses, more allergies, or negative responses to things.
Yeah.
So with that being the case, there are many people who are seeing doctors, and it's hard for them to find solutions until they find the right doctor who refers them to the right place. And in many cases, they find mold allergies or mold sensitivities. Then when they do testing in their homes, they find the high levels of mold or traces of mold or mycotoxins or endotoxins in the home. And they are very poisonous, very strong.
Yeah.
People.
And it seems to be, at least, and I don't know much about the subject, but it seems to be some people have higher sensitivities to those things than others.
Yes.
Yeah, I had a good buddy of mine who's, I believe his daughter got very, very sick, and it took him like a year and a half or something to really figure it out. And then they found out it was the mold under the crawl space in the house they were in. And, thankfully they were able to identify the problem. But it's a serious issue for a lot of people out there having these kind of issues. Okay.
Sure.
And then maybe, so that's, we're talking about the homeowners, which is obviously the most important people in the equation, but to the home itself, what kind of long-term damage can, having water coming into a crawl space or a basement, or what kind of long-term damage can that mold create for the house itself?
Having water under or around the foundation too long, it can cause settling of the foundation. So that would cause cracking and such in the foundation.
Sure.
And of course you don't want that. It dilutes pesticides that pest control people put in the ground, making it easier for bugs to get in.
Sure.
It attracts all kinds of bugs in general, just to the moisture.
Yeah.
The water will definitely increase humidity. Too much humidity is going to breed the mold, and that can cause rot in the wood and breaking of some joist in some cases.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Warping of wood. That's pretty much it. And the health issues, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Bryan. So tell me, you get called in, you get the phone call, whether it's the realtor that's, now these issues have come to light when they're going to sell the house and the inspector gets under there, or maybe a homeowner just calls you and says, hey, something doesn't look right down here. What are the fixes that you guys are typically doing? What do those look like? Walk me through what, a typical job looks like for you guys.
Oh, sometimes they call and there's a water issue. Sometimes it's water or mold or signs of microbial growth.
Yeah.
So we'll
go. That's the safe word we use, because nobody likes mold, but microbial growth is a different. It's all the same thing.
It's all the same.
The fungi.
It sure is.
Yeah.
So we go and assess it. In many cases, as far as water goes, the interior soil level of the crawl space is lower than the exterior. And so
say that one more time. It's worth repeating.
Okay. The interior soil level of the crawl space is lower than the exterior soil level. And for some background in that, best way to describe this is we've had waterproofing codes on basements in this area for roughly 65 years. You build a basement, the first thing you do is dig a big hole in the ground. If we were farmers and wanted a pond, we dig a hole in the ground as well. The water will come.
Sure.
So they had enough complaints about water and crawl spaces that roughly 34 years ago, they came out with waterproofing codes on crawl spaces. They said, okay, builder, you've dug a hole in the ground, expect water, you'll have to do something. Well, if the interior soil level was just 2, 3, 4 inches lower, in many cases, the builder would backfill and raise the grade on the inside so that it was a little higher than the outside. That'd be the equivalent of filling a low spot in the yard.
Right. So the water doesn't naturally dip down into the hole.
Yes, you've eliminated the void or the hole, displacing the water, because everything in nature is trying to reach an equilibrium between moisture content and temperature.
Yeah.
Let's see, if it was deeper than that.
And that's the science lesson for today. Keep going.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
If it was deeper than that, then they had the option of doing a drainage system, either on the outside or the inside.
Yeah.
Most builders do it on the inside. So it's a perimeter foundation drain. And for the sake of our conversation, a French drain, which many people use that term, sits away from the home. If it's a drain next to the foundation, it's a perimeter foundation drain.
Yeah.
When most do it on the inside, there are less steps to it, and it's more successful long term. It lasts better. Some do it on the outside, and that's just collecting, managing the water.
Yeah. So, kind of on a tangent, but if somebody's building a home or they're having a home built, which would you suggest that they push for?
The interior will be a better solution long term. If they did an interior drainage system and coated the walls on the outside with a very good coating.
Yeah.
And backfilled to create a very good slope away.
Yeah.
That would be a really good option.
Okay.
Doing those things.
So that'd be the best option. Okay. Go
now,
ahead.
If a home's on the market, we go and take a look, and it does have the microbial growth. We typically assess it or give two options for it. One option would be to, in real estate terms, correct the defect.
Right.
And in the real estate sense, in most cases, the mold is bad enough at that point that insulation has to come out to remediate it properly. And then new insulation goes in, and then a new vapor barrier. And that corrects the defects, but doesn't correct or prevent the mold from coming back, so it doesn't control humidity.
Yeah.
So as a second option, we always give a proposal to encapsulate the space, sealing it, and then install either a dehumidifier or use the HVAC system to control the humidity. And y'all refer to that as an upgrade.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I would argue that it is. So tell me more about the encapsulated crawl space. So just to recap for my folks that maybe, we're going over their heads right now. So if you come in and if you got mold in the crawl space, you've got one of two options. You can come in, you can remediate the mold and just basically cure the problem. And sometimes that's just, cleaning up the mold. Sometimes if it's gotten into the insulation, you need to rip that out and then put up new insulation and put down a fresh vapor barrier. But what you're telling me, Bryan, is that if you do that, you're basically going to fix the problem, but the problem's going to come back because ultimately the source of that problem is just the humidity that's in the air and the fact that crawl space is going to get that humidity and that heat back in it. And eventually that's going to become another problem again.
Yes.
So then step number 2, which yes, you would say it is an upgrade, but the only true long-term fix for a crawl space is to encapsulate it. Walk me through what that looks like and why that is a long-term fix, if you would.
Okay. If you're going to control humidity, you have to first control airflow, and that's the sealing up part. So there's really a cleaning phase, a sealing phase, and then insulating and dehumidifying. So the cleanup part would be removing the insulation, spray, treat, scrub, remove the mold, do it under negative air pressure so that mold spores and the products used in cleaning aren't going up through the home. Mm-hmm. Then you begin the sealing process, sealing all the vents. A new door, you must have a really good door that seals properly. Many homes we see that have been encapsulated in the past, they didn't replace the door with one that seals. Yeah. So they're leaking air out that door, in some cases for years and years. Yeah. They shouldn't be at all.
And you're spending good money on getting it encapsulated, and then you got a big hole in the crawl space, basically, which is what that door is.
That's it.
Okay.
Then if you look at energy loss in my home, the band board or rim joist area, I believe is number 6 or 7. So you go around and seal the rim joist band board area. Everywhere that a wire comes through the floor or a plumbing pipe, you caulk or seal around it.
Yeah.
Then you install your new vapor barrier, covering the ground and extending up the walls. Mm-hmm. And it has to cover every inch of the ground, and every seam needs to be sealed. It needs to go up pilasters and seal around those. And typically a builder will use a 6 mil poly, and 6 mil is fine, but it really is the least acceptable you could use. So we'd always recommend something a little thicker.
The builders don't use the least they can get away with. You're telling me they do that, Brian?
I don't
believe it.
I've heard they will.
That's the rumor going around, right?
Yeah.
And what we're talking about with the vapor barrier. So that's the stuff you can go buy this at Lowe's or Home Depot. It's basically plastic sheeting that just keeps that moisture. It basically creates that, creates a barrier between the ground and the air in the crawl space.
Yes. Yeah. Typically, you want to use at least a 12 mil. They have 14 mil, 16, 20, and higher. Some people want a heavier mil. The thicker you get, the more durable it will be long term.
Yeah.
So that goes in. Then you insulate the space. Now, how you insulate depends on how you're going to control the humidity mechanically. Now you can control it with your HVAC system, or you can control it with a dehumidifier, or you can use both. Mm-hmm. Now if you use an HVAC system, you're putting vents in the ductwork that are heating and cooling it, and you're putting a vent in the return to circulate the air.
Interesting.
So if you're heating and cooling the space, you insulate the cold surface, and the best way to describe this is, or to explain this is, if you're building a new home and you're looking at insulation for your new home, typically you're going to price insulating the cold surfaces, which are the perimeter walls, the upper level ceiling, and the lower level floor.
Right.
If you're heating and cooling the crawl space, the lower level floor is no longer a cold surface. So then at that point, instead of putting bad insulation back between the joist, you insulate the perimeter walls and the rim joist or band board area. Mm-hmm. And then you heat and cool that space.
Interesting.
Now, the HVAC system works really well as long as it's running very regularly.
Right.
However, there is a 4 to 6 week period as we're heating up going through spring into early summer, and a 4 to 6 week period as we're cooling down through fall into early winter, where HVAC systems don't run much at all.
Sure.
They're the same periods where we get calls where people say, really need you to come out and look. Our home smells musty.
Yeah.
We found mold in a closet. They're the same periods where you look at your power bill and go, wow, good month, we're saving money.
Sure.
Same periods.
Growing mold, saving money.
Same periods where people wake up in the night hot and they don't know why. They'll go to look at the thermostat and it might be set on 71 or 72 and read 72. But if they had a hygrometer next to it showing humidity, they'd realize, oh, my humidity's high.
Because the HVAC isn't running to suck that
not running.
humidity. So is there anything should they just be running it with a fan on, or
Typically running it with just the fan on increases humidity.
because you're pulling it in from outside?
Yeah, it just brings it in. So those periods, if it's 6 weeks here and 6 weeks here, that could be 3 months that humidity under your home and in your home could be high.
25% of the year.
If you use a dehumidifier, it'll proactively control the humidity regardless of what's going on upstairs or outside.
Yeah.
Now you can use both together,
Mm-hmm.
and they complement each other very nicely. So the dehumidifier wouldn't run quite as much through the summer.
Sure.
And then in those between periods, the dehumidifier would take care of the humidity when the HVAC system wasn't running.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Okay. And just if somebody's curious, how much if you guys are coming into encapsulated crawl space, and I know it varies based on the size of it, everything, but how much does that typically run if somebody's just out there saying, hey, honey, that's probably something we should do. It's not a bad idea. What does that usually run if you're able to share?
It, as you said, based on square footage, linear footage, whether they have a dehumidifier or not,
Yeah.
it can vary greatly. But I'll say it could run anywhere from 5 to 15.
Yeah.
I've seen some that were 30.
Yeah.
Very big homes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all over the board. And also it depends on the company doing the work.
Oh, sure.
Sometimes you can find big price differences, and sometimes some companies have more overhead.
Yeah.
So it just depends on the company.
Yeah, absolutely.
well.
But at the end of the day, I mean, if that's something you're worried about for a health concern for your family, or you're buying a home that you plan on staying in long term, I can tell you if you do have a crawl space that has mold issues, I mean, a lot of times it can be $2,000-$3,000 fix. When you go to sell the home. So maybe you want to do that, get the use and the enjoyment out of it, or maybe not the enjoyment, but get the health benefits out of it. And then, you're not going to have that issue, when you go to sell that home down the road.
Yes. And one more quick thing.
Yeah.
So many people looking for a home will look at the home and they can find a bunch of things they'd rather or prefer, but there are only a few things that give them fear. They're water, foundation settling, wood rot, and the biggest one, mold.
Yeah.
And so someone putting a home on the market is best served if they can get rid of those fear items.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fix them, take care of it.
Yeah, and those are the items you mentioned. I mean, and you speaking of fear, but those are the things where if you sell your home, you get it under contract, and then the buyer does the home inspection. If they find one of those four, they're usually running for the hills. They're looking for a way to get out of the deal. So, yeah, absolutely. Bryan, so tell me, if somebody's out there, maybe the crawl space isn't bad, maybe it's, maybe they don't have an issue at the moment. What are some good preventative maintenance things they can do this weekend or they move in a house, they want to make sure these things are done, or, stuff they should be doing on a monthly or quarterly basis just to make sure they don't develop these problems? What are some of those things if your son or daughter bought a house, you would tell them to do on a regular basis?
Well, they should definitely inspect their crawl space on a regular basis. And it's best to take a look under the home after it's rained very hard. Not just your average 1-inch rain in a day.
Sure.
And in Richmond, some days we had 3 inches of rain.
Yeah.
We've had 5 inches in a day before. But it's hard to know whether you really get water in your crawl space unless there's a lot of evidence of it. Many homeowners will put their home on the market and the home inspector identifies leakage, and many of them say, we've never had water in the crawl space.
Well, you just didn't know it.
Just didn't know, and they're sure they're fine people, and they just don't know unless you go in there, and most people don't.
Yeah.
But I'd go under the crawl space a couple times a year. I'd look at the wood. Does the wood look clean? Is there anything on it? Is there any discoloration? Look for bugs, of course. I'd route my downspouts away from the home.
Go to Home Depot, get for the $8, you can get those extenders that just take it out another 2 feet or whatever it is.
That's perfect. Or further, if you want to bury them away,
Yeah.
you're better off to bury them through smooth wall pipe.
Yeah.
But just managing roof water and surface water is very important.
Yeah. So you always want to get that water away from the foundation.
Yes.
Yeah. And then maybe even bringing in some topsoil and create a nice little grade away from the home. Make sure the dirt isn't going back into the crawl space.
That's it.
Yeah.
As soil settles around the foundation of the home from when it's built, most people add more mulch. And water goes through that mulch easily and then hits that depression and goes back to the home.
It slides right into the house.
Yeah, so really they're best off if someone's staying at home long term, if they were to pull their mulch back and bring in clean red clay or something that really sheds water.
Yeah.
And raise the grade to slope it away, then put the mulch back on.
Yeah.
And that's not going to solve water leakage, but it will help.
Yeah. And that's something you do one time and you're done, I would imagine. Keep an eye on it, but
Yeah, it wouldn't be something you do often, sure.
yeah. Cool. Well, Bryan, I appreciate your time today. What we're going to do now, we're going to go to the fire round where we answer just kind of rapid fire a handful of questions that we got from our Facebook and our Instagram. So we're just going to jump into that right now at the moment, if you don't mind. Cool.
All right.
Well, now to the fire round, and we'll see you guys back in just a second. All right, Jacob, hit us with the questions, my friend.
All right, how's it going? So first question is
Jacob back from his recent stardom on the last episode.
Yeah, I blew up. I toured France. It was great. So is there a safe mold that you can have, or is all mold bad?
In general, all mold is bad. If someone has a strong immune system, eats really well, then they'll be able to tolerate higher levels than other people. But in general, you don't want it.
Even on blue cheese?
Even on what?
Even on blue cheese?
Well,
I'm not into
cheese is a
fancy
little
cheeses,
different.
but that's a different kind of
A
mold.
little different, I guess.
Okay.
Stomach acid breaks that down if your stomach acid's strong. So
Okay. All right.
protects you.
All right. What's the biggest mold problem you've ever seen in a home?
I'm sure you've seen some nasty crawl spaces.
Oh, I've seen homes where they look like stalactites or stalagmites, these mold hanging all through.
Like crystals?
More soft, furry-looking stuff just hanging down. I've seen homes where they had hot water leak in the crawl space, just a pinhole in the whole crawl space steamed up, and they had to rip out the entire flooring of that level. So I've seen some pretty dramatic situations.
Alrighty.
Things that make you go, ugh.
Are you more likely to have mold with a finished basement?
It won't matter whether it's finished or unfinished. If moisture's coming through the wall or there's any leakage, really you shouldn't finish. If there are any signs of moisture, you should never finish without correcting it.
Okay. Because otherwise you're just setting yourself up for failure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we kind of touched on this before, but we're running downspouts waterproof the crawl space.
No, you should always manage your surface water and run your downspouts away from your home, getting the water further away, but it's not a solution. It's not recognized anywhere as a waterproofing solution.
Yeah. It'll help your cause, but it's not going to, it's not a complete solution.
Yes.
Yeah. And the last question is, does good ventilation under the house with like vents in the crawl space prevent mold?
No, it won't prevent mold. The only thing that will prevent and control mold is controlling humidity. So many people will ask, should they keep their vents open or closed? And
It's a question I've always asked.
yes,
Because I've heard both sides. I've heard different opinions from smart people.
I think if they are closed, especially at the beginning of the hot season, then they're less likely to have lots of condensation where you reach dew point with a hot, humid air touching surfaces. But if a crawl space is going to be closed up long, I think it should be mechanically dehumidified in general, because it's definitely going to hold the moisture in.
So tell me if I'm hearing you right. So if you don't have an encapsulation, then it's not a great solution, but you should probably leave them open. But if you're going to have them closed, you really need to have it properly encapsulated. Did I hear that right?
Yes. And if you wanted to open them on occasion, if it's a drier day, it's going to be a low humidity day.
Yeah.
It'd be great to have them open. Most people don't want to pay attention to that on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. But fall is a great time if your home's not encapsulated to have your vents open, because the air's very dry in general.
Yeah. Cool.
I have a quick follow-up. Is there any type of like automated vent system for houses?
There are some automated vents, but they haven't proven to do a really good job over time. They work with a little temperature spring, and over time it just doesn't seem to hold up.
Gotcha.
And I'd imagine if you're going to spend that money, you might as well spend it encapsulating, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. If you encapsulate, you're going to have a healthier, more efficient home, and a home that's absolutely more saleable, because at the time of sale, the buyers will have peace of mind.
Yeah, and I feel like that's something, the encapsulated crawl space, that's something maybe like at the first time home buyer price point, people don't really, unless, dad's helping them out, like they don't really appreciate that. But you move up in the price point for somebody that's already owned a home before, and they kind of get it that like, oh yeah, that's a good thing.
Yes.
That's a good thing. So, well, very cool. Well, Bryan, we'll superimpose it, or I say we, Jacob will superimpose it on the screen here. But if somebody wanted to reach out to get an evaluation or have you do some work, where would be the best place to get a hold of you?
Just to call our office, 804-550-7717.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you for coming out. Appreciate you coming out. Appreciate having you. That was another episode. We will see you guys on the next one.
Thanks for joining us for the Chris Elliott Real Estate Show. If you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes, please contact Chris Elliott at chris@chriselliottrealestate.com or by phone at 804-980-1898. And please join us again next time for the Chris Elliott Real Estate Show.